thank you so much for joining me. I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience, and these days I primarily promote narcissistic abuse awareness. I've been thinking a lot about my period of the marriage, how much I didn't understand what it would be like to be in a toxic relationship. That even though I'd spent 20 years listening to counseling problems, listening to clients talk about all sorts of issues, because my relationship was relatively healthy, I really didn't have a clue. And here's the other wild part. I grew up in a dysfunctional home with chronic gaslighting. Yes, so I was chronically gaslit as a kid. But, when you're a kid, you can do things that you can't do when you're in a marriage. Like I would go take long walks. And we worked on a farm, dairy farm. So I would go off and do my chores. And I would hide in my room and read a book. So I wasn't in the constant throes of family time. I wasn't trying to negotiate complex adult relationships. I was just surviving an uncomfortable home. But when I got into the marriage that was toxic, the second marriage, it was a completely different experience. I had no idea for the first year, which is when we dated and got engaged, that I had met somebody who was being deceptive. I had no idea he was living a second life. It never even crossed my mind. My first marriage was with somebody who, though not perfect, actually quite difficult in some ways. I was the sole, kind of ran the home most of the time with him, and he worked and provided well for us. But when he came home, he expected to be off, and he left everything to me. So it wasn't easy. I felt lonely. I wasn't completely satisfied. I would say it was wearing me out. But my first husband, Brad, was a man of his word. He told the truth always, and I never doubted him. I never once assumed he stepped out on me. He brought home his stubs. His paychecks was dumped right into the checking account. He trusted me to pay bills, to manage the kids. It was a relationship built on trust. And we really commingled our life. We were together 33 years, and we commingled our life at every level. So the idea that somebody would come into a relationship with ulterior motives, that would not actually perceive the relationship as a joint venture, that it was actually competitive. This was the piece I really didn't understand, that it was competitive, meaning that he was jealous of my accomplishments. He viewed me from a position of distrust, like I might be out to get him, like he had to watch his own back. And he really viewed this from the perspective that it was his job to take care of his needs. He was not going to bring himself into this relationship and rely on the relationship to provide for his needs, which was totally the antithesis of what I had with my first marriage. So to me, this was just, I couldn't even conceive of it because it was, even in my dysfunctional home, my parents worked as a team. They really worked as a team. I had no clue that there could be this type of a predatory, antagonistic style of relating to a partner. I likened it, in fact, during the middle of when we were starting to break up, I once said to him, do you know, because he didn't grow up in America, I said, do you know the Hokey Pokey song? And he kind of didn't really know. And I said, well, I described it, how you stand in a ring and you in a circle and you put your right arm in, you put your left arm in. I said, but at the end, you put your whole self in. I said, it's like, I never get you to do that. You never put your whole self in. You're only just putting a right arm in temporarily, and then maybe you'll put in a left arm temporarily, but it's never all you. You're always holding a part of yourself back. So when I discovered 2 months into the marriage, because of a woman writing me a letter and saying, hey, I want you to let you know that you've been spotted. She actually didn't tell me these details until after the marriage was over, but you've been spotted together. And I didn't know this, but I've been dating the guy you married. He and I have been dating 3 months, and we've been having sex together. And sorry to break the news. And she was a little cruel, a little crass. She said, I guess the joke's not just on me, it's on you too, which is, you could tell her anger, her hostility, that she was being duped, and that she didn't really care a whole lot about my feelings and the fact that she was devastating me, breaking my whole world apart. by telling me this news. Now, I'm thankful. She told me, but I remember it was early in the morning and the last night of our delayed honeymoon. Can you imagine that? I learned this on the last night of our delayed honeymoon we took 2 months after we got married. And I remember laying at 4 a.m. in the morning, first of all, feeling literally like there's two snow globes of worlds, realities. There was the reality of I thought that I had with this person for over a year. And everything I knew and everything he told me and our lunches during his work week and the way he came over and had sandwiches and how we got engaged and how he took business trips and how I would pray for him and be so concerned during his business trips and all of that, this way of living that I thought. And then there was this world. She just presented me with proof. She provided evidence that I could not refute, that proved she knew this man, that she had been in the car and seen my belongings, seen the wedding gift I had given him because he put it on her wrist and she accurately described it. I felt like these two snow globes of the world she presented and the world that I've been living literally came together, smashed. And for a moment, no world existed. There was no world. There wasn't the world that I'd had, and there wasn't the world. I didn't know the other world. And I literally lost time. My mind went white with static, and I lost time. I don't know how long. I don't know how long. I know that at 6 a.m., roughly 2 hours later, I woke him up and said, hey, someone texted me and said, she knows you. You know what his reaction was, which is a completely guilty reaction. It's like, stop talking to her. He knew. So as I've been thinking about all of this and thinking about the upcoming webinar with Dr. Kristen Milstead, which if you have not gotten her book, I highly recommend it. Her book is called Why Can't I Just Leave? Why Can't I Just Leave? She is, I would say, Dr. Milstead is one of there's a few people in the world I consider leading experts on cognitive dissonance. I would say Dr. Ramani, Sandra Brown, who wrote the Women Who Love Psychopaths. But Dr. Milstead, I would put right up there. She's actually a researcher, sociologist. She dissects what happens to her. You know, in my book, Love You More, The Harrowing Tales of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross, I tell you my story, what happened to me, but I don't really dissect it. But she spends the bulk of the book, her book, Why Can't I Just Leave, explaining what is cognitive. She tells you the word cognitive dissonance, which I think, I wish I hadn't even say that word to you because I think it's so confusing. But she explains why we spend so much time in these relationships, why we can't get out, what causes this sense of disconnection and paralysis and confusion and fog and indecisiveness, why we get fixed in these relationships and can't get out. And even after we get out of them, why we continue to have them take up mental space in our head. I learned, I'm going to go ahead and share this because I don't want to be controlled by it, but I learned that even though I'm 3 years out of my toxic relationship, he's blocked on all of the platforms that I can. He doesn't actually have social media platforms, but I've learned he's listening to the podcast. It's been devastating to feel like one of my spaces has been intruded and invaded by someone who's 3 years post me. It's like, dude, get a life, move on. But yet they do this. They don't go away, and they take these mental space from us and consume us. Why does this happen? If any of this you can relate to, this webinar on August 18th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is a place you need to go. You need to go here and listen to Dr. Milstead talk about what is happening, why mentally we get trapped and fixed and paralyzed, why a trauma bond gets developed. In fact, she said, it wasn't her that said this, Sandra Brown said this in her recent seminar on her study of 600 pathological love relationships, was this fascinating study. She said, you wanna break the trauma bond? You need to resolve the cognitive dissonance. What is cognitive dissonance? It's the confusion. It's the mental confusion you're feeling in these relationships. It's the mental confusion. Because what happens is there's duality. There's a duality that happens. You think you know who you met. It's who they presented. You don't realize that it really wasn't who they say they are. You met a mask that they created in order for you to like them, choose them, in order for them to use you. all a variety of reasons. There's lots of reasons why people create a mass through love bombing, but you don't think that that's not a real person. Yeah, they're putting their best foot forward. Everybody makes a sale during dating. I mean, that's obvious, but you don't realize that this is to get you into a relationship and that you didn't really know the real person. You didn't know them. In fact, the woman that was dating my ex had 5 dogs, listened to country music, which is great. That's a great lifestyle. It's a lifestyle my family had that I grew up out of. And my ex, by the way, hated pets, hated them, confessed that he'd killed an animal at one point in his youth, and vowed we would never have pets in the house, and he hated country music. Now, why did she think she met the love of her life, and that's her lifestyle, and yet he's making it clear to me as we're preparing to get married that would not be a part of our lifestyle? See, that's what I'm talking about. She really thought she met somebody like that. He mimicked that. He pretended that was true for him when he was in the relationship with her. Now, when he first met me, he pretended some things too that I found out later that weren't true. He pretended that he was into classical music. He was in techno music. He was not in classical music. I don't know if he knew what Beethoven's Fifth was, honestly. He also pretended that he was a very deeply spiritual man, and even said at one point he pastored. Is any of that true? I have no idea, nor do I care. The point is, he was trying to prove to me, to get me to like him, that he was like me. He was like me. So what happens is you have these dual realities, the reality of the person that you met, and then the person that you start to live with. The other reality is the person you start to live with. And they're not the same. They're not the same at all. And then you end up thinking, oh, it's because we're having problems. That's why he's not who he was, or she's not who she was. That's why they're angry and irritable and mean. And if I just get my act together and do better, and we have more date nights, or maybe we have more sex, or maybe I listen better, or I work more, I bring more money home, whatever it is that you think that it is that you're going to do to fix this, you do more of trying to fix. What you don't realize is they're creating the confusion because of the duality. They're not who they really are. There's not that authenticity of a single personality. And so you aren't getting to meet them, but the real them keeps slipping through, and that's causing the confusion. So then you end up thinking, I just need to work harder. We need to go therapy. We went to an intensive program for 3 days, which was terribly expensive. And then we moved to the new country, he ended up getting into therapy. I found my own therapist. We searched for a therapist together. Then we ended up finding a therapist, which he then weaponized the treatment and then got her to fawn all over him, and it corrupted the relationship, and so that it wasn't effective, ultimately causing the whole thing to collapse. So that's back to, this is cognitive dissonance. This confusion and the way that you're taking it on is cognitive dissonance. And it's very hard to break. If you find yourself unable to leave, that's the problem. If you find yourself unsure who you're in a relationship with, that's the problem. If you find yourself post-relationship, but you can't move on because you don't have any closure and you don't know what the hell happened, that's the problem. So really, I hope that you'll come to this webinar. It's going to be informational. We're going to interview her. I know some of you are scared to show up because you're like, oh, it's a webinar and it's going to be on video, and does that mean then I don't have any privacy? No, you have privacy. The only people on screen is going to be the panelists, which is Lisa Sony, Lindsay Goodman, Bree Peterson, myself, and I'm trying to think of who the last person is. Oh, Manjeet Rupai, along with Dr. Kristen Milstead. We'll only be people on the screen. You will not be on the screen. SJ of La Disco Mama is going to be our moderator. She will take your chat. So the way you'll communicate your questions is you'll be talking to each other, talking to her while the whole webinar is going on. And at the end, she's going to pull out your questions and then feed them to Dr. Milstead at the very end, so that if you have a question, then you actually get to ask your questions at the end. So again, I really hope that you're going to be there. I'm going to be talking a lot about it because I'll tell you, I was desperate when I was in there, and I'm feeling choked up. When I was in that relationship, I had never felt such agonizing confusion in my life. Agonizing confusion. I jumped on every possible group that I could. I listened to everything, resource I could. I didn't know about this. I had never even, I know, it's shocking. How could a psychologist not know about narcissistic abuse? If you want to hear more about why psychology is behind the 8 ball on this, I'd be happy to talk about it. But as a psychologist, this was never something that was covered in graduate school. If I had had this, wow, it would have been a game changer for me. It really would have. It really would have. So I want it to be a game changer for you. I want you to have the support that I didn't have 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. I want that. I read every single book that I can. So I'm going to now get off talking about this and shift the gears to talking about what you want to talk about. So let me introduce myself again to those who've just joined. I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm across platforms. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube now. We do longer content on YouTube. I'm starting to get all that up and running. Same handle. I'm also on TikTok. I'm probably the most active, honestly, on TikTok. But I really want to be able to do more of this. I'm going to try to go live on both platforms, Instagram as well as TikTok, and then it will be like a day behind, or a live behind on YouTube. So if you miss one of them and you want to catch it again, just jump to the next day that a live is occurring, and it'll be a time behind. For example, this live today will be live on YouTube on Thursday at 2 p.m. Today's live on YouTube was last Thursday's at 2 p.m. So do you see what I'm saying? So it's a time behind. So I go live on YouTube on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. I go live here on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. But I'm ahead by 1 here. You guys are seeing me today. And my YouTube handle is the same as my Instagram handle, the same as my handle on TikTok. It's Kerry McAvoy, PhD. So I want to turn it over to you. And I want to take your questions, which is what I love doing, is why you guys I think you love hearing me answer your questions. And, why not? I mean, why not get a psychologist's opinion on something? And my hair is kind of messy there. Sorry about that. So the way to do it here is to put your thumbs up ahead of your comments. And that way I'm going to be watching both platforms. Put your thumbs up if you have a question for me, and I'll try to take it. Please be aware that it's really busy here and I won't get to everybody's questions, but you keep coming back and I know I'll eventually get to your question, okay? I know that. I know there's a lot of, it's hard to get help. It's hard to get good, find good counseling. It's hard to get information, and I get it. I get that you feel that you're really excited to be able to chance to talk to me here. So I love being here and talking to you. And I want to know, by the way, as we're talking about that, taking your question is, what would you wish that I would talk about? What things have I not brought up on YouTube or here in TikTok or here on Instagram? What would you really like to have me cover that I have not covered yet? Please let me know, and even DM me. You can I read all of my DMs and I answer my own DMs. So please let me know. I'd love to hear your comments about that. So a question came in with, why do I keep missing my ex, my narcissistic ex? Yeah, that's because of a trauma bond. You haven't resolved your trauma bond. What is a trauma bond? Because that's a complicated word that we like to throw out there, but do we ever stop and explain what it is? So I know many of you have asked questions already. There are lots of questions coming in, but in order to talk about a trauma bond, I'm going to take Mrs. Mama's question to tie it into the other question, because they kind of work off of each other. As I was explaining when I first came on here, is that when you meet somebody who is pathologically ill, in a sense of have a personality disorder, especially a narcissistic or antisocial personality disorder, and sometimes a borderline personality disorder, not always, but sometimes, due to their fragile ego, they don't really show up. They feel unable to be currently present with you. So they create a false persona in order to have you have a relationship. They want a relationship, but they don't want intimacy, because intimacy is vulnerability, and they don't want vulnerability. They want to control, not be vulnerable. So the way to do that is to have the relationship under their control, under their rules. And so what they do is they use intermittent reinforcement. So they punish you and reward you for showing up in certain ways. And they won't fully be present, but they expect that out of you. So it's kind of a one-way street. And there's this threat that hangs over you that if you don't quite do it right, they're going to disappear on you. They're going to abandon you. So, you love them. You would feel this niggling fear that one wrong step and this person's out of here. You feel the threat of loss hanging over you. And as a result, because we're hardwired, I know on these platforms we love to be hard on each other for wanting to be in a relationship, but guys, we are hardwired for belonging. Abraham Maslow on the hierarchy of needs says it is I think it's the third rung on the pyramid of needs. The first one is I want to live. I need to breathe and eat and have food. I need shelter so I don't die of the cold. And the very next one is we need to belong. They did studies on monkeys. It's called Harlow's monkeys. If any of you have had any kind of bachelor's in psychology or social work, you probably heard about this. But they took some monkeys, and this is very nice. I'm sorry about this. For those of you who are very sensitive, you want to be a little trigger warning here. They had some of them reared with a mom that was made out of chicken wire, and they had another group that was reared by a mom that was made of terry cloth. So one was soft and one was wiry and hard and cold. Both had bottle nipples for the babies to nurse off of, and they could get food whenever they wanted. And then they watched the socialization of these monkeys. And interestingly, are we not surprised? The ones raised by the chicken wire mom was a disorganized mess. They lacked social structure. They didn't know how to initiate mating protocols. They were excessively aggressive. They were a mess. They needed the socialization of a warm maternal object, whereas the terry cloth moms' babies did better. They've also found this with infants. They found that when you hold your baby and you comfort them and you feed them and nurse them, that their heart rate, all these autonomic conditions like temperature and blood pressure and heart rate lowers and slows and moves back into more normal range. We are hardwired to need belonging. There's something that happens when we're in a connection with each other. Now, what happens is people who are afraid to be intimate use this, somehow innately know that this is a vulnerability of all of us. It's a vulnerability of theirs as well, which is why they guard it so well, that they use that as a threat of withdrawal if we don't participate in the way that we want. Now, what happens is this creates a bond. It doesn't create attachment. Attachment's based on healthy reciprocity and give and take and mutual risk. It develops a bond based on fear. And so you show up out of worries of losing this person and keeping them happy, and that puts you under this person's control, and that's called a trauma bond. It's actually a form, yes, I'm using the word brainwashing. You've been brainwashed. This is what cult leaders use. This is the same tactics that military uses. It's the tactics to kind of break a person down and make them submit to the will of someone else. That's what's happened. So when you get into these relationships and you think you've met somebody, and then they start this showing up and then withdrawing and showing up and withdrawing and threatening you and doing all this kind of emotional manipulation, you then begin to work harder and harder to keep them happy, and you get more fearful that you're going to lose them, and you do even more emotional lifting, and that creates the bond. So then what happens though when you get into the relationship, because for them, a narcissist is somebody who's not really dealing with reality. They have this fantasized perception of if somebody loved me and respected me in a certain way and honored me and showed up for me in a certain way, then all my problems would be solved. I'd be fixed. This inner angst that I feel, this inner turmoil that I have would go away. Well, that's not real life. No relationship works like that. And so they get into the relationship with you and they find out that you're human, just like every other person they've ever met is human, and it's not going well, and they become disillusioned, and then the mask starts to drop and you feel the increased building of tension, like, oh shit, it's going wrong, and this person I fear is going to leave me, I can feel now leaving me at some level, and you work harder and you work harder, and so the bond gets more intense. It gets more intense. So that's why you can't get this person out of your mind. It's because you've had this connection, this intense bond that you've been living to keep them happy. And unfortunately for you, it puts you on a cocktail of chemicals inside your body that makes you then I don't really like the word addicted, but I know a lot of us use it. I think it's a good way to sort of like describe it, dynamic, but in a clinical sense, it's really not actually an addiction, but it's similar. You've gotten used to this sense of build up fear, and then the reward of, they show up and maybe you have a good moment, or maybe you end up having a gift from them or something, and then you build up and things go bad again, and you get into this cycle. You get used to this cycle. And as a result of the cycle, it's extremely hard to break. It's extremely hard to break. And you then carry it with you all the way out even after you leave the relationship. So how do you break all of this? How do you break all of this? Because I know that many of you are asking that. And that's back to what I started talking about today. The way that you break this is you have to settle on who it is that you really met, who it is that you're really in a relationship with. You need to decide on the truth. I know for me, I kept hearing people say to me, listen to what this person says, ignore what they do. Does people who love you talk to other women? No, of course not. They don't. Do people who love you run you down, criticize you, and keep you working, in fact, run you all day without food? No, of course not. They're concerned about my well-being. Does people love you, sit next to you and watch TV until 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, set the alarm 2-3 hours ahead so you don't get enough sleep, even though they know you need 8+ hours of sleep? Do they do that to you? No, they don't. Do people love you, leave you running scared all the time? No, they don't. You should feel safe. But because they say, and this is what mine said, I've never loved anyone the way I've loved you, or I've never worked so hard to have they tell you all this stuff and you think, oh, I want it to be true. I hope it's true. I thought it was true. And that's back to what we started with talking about cognitive dissonance, that mental confusion, that duality of both. It's a both. They love me. They loathe me. They trust me. They're paranoid about me. They say that they want me to be independent, but they control me. I can't, all of that creates a confusion and keeps you trapped. The way to break it is to resolve the confusion and settle on what's true. That was a really long answer. I hoped it helped and made a little bit of sense. I hope that it felt cohesive. But yes, I do feel people say, in fact, I just heard this on one of my platforms. Have you forgiven him? Are you over it? Why did the perseveration? Well, yes. First of all, what does forgiveness mean? Will I forget? No, absolutely not. It's changed me. I'm a profoundly different person. Who I was before is not coming back, nor do I really actually want her back, to be honest with you. I love her naivete. I love the fact that she was so trusting. I kind of grieve the fact that I'm a little more jaded and I'm not that kind of trusting anymore. But I don't need people the way I used to need people, and I'm not going to let anyone define me the way I used to. I used to go in and really think that who I am was based upon how the relationship went. And today, no, I will never do that again. So I don't miss any of that part, but I miss the sweetness, that part I miss, but I love the strength. That part is awesome. And so, yes, it has changed me, but also this state of confusion that we live in, that creates a chronic level of stress, which then has very, very serious neurological effects. And that mental fog that you're feeling, that's real. It's really actually a decline neurologically. So yes, this is really important that you get out of it. You need to be in a safe place and back into, a place of calmness where you feel in control. Absolutely. So let's take another question. It's too far for me to scroll up to find it. So I'm looking at both of the platforms. What else would you like to know that I could answer today about narcissistic abuse or healthy relationships or about breaking a trauma bond or anything related to all of this? That's great. Somebody just said we grow through suffering. There's a quote. I don't want to scroll away to find it. I found this really fantastic quote. It was on Alone. I don't know how many of you guys watched this survival show called Alone. They just finished the 8th season. And they have these quotes before each episode. One of them was from Horace. And it's about what adversity does to us, how it changes us. And we find out what we're made in the middle of adversity. I would say that's true. I would say I felt like it was for me going through fire. And I do feel a bit more refined than I was before I'd gone through it, for sure. Absolutely. So someone asked me earlier, and I missed the question. They want to know, how do you know that you are in a relationship with a narcissist? What should you look for that will tell you if this person, your partner, is narcissistic? And I know people get really edgy about this, and they get very uncomfortable and feeling it's like you're not a clinician, you shouldn't diagnose. But there are ways for you to recognize them. So these are some things to watch out for. People who have personality disorders, particularly narcissistic personalities, create a chronic state of upsetness. You tend to feel like you're moving from crisis to crisis with this person. I know that when I was in the thick of that relationship, I kept thinking, if we'll get through this drama, then we'll get on steady footing and things will get better, life will calm down. And no, it didn't. It just moved into the next drama, and then the next drama, and then and if it wasn't the drama that he was hitting, he created it. So one of the things to look for is this called chronic upsetness. Another thing you're going to notice is you just don't know what's real, or pieces of detail seem to be missing, or it's always, the scope isn't what you thought, it's bigger or different. It's a state of confusion. You're just constantly confused. Part of it's because of the gaslighting that's happening and the deception that's occurring and the manipulation, but also because they just don't see you as a partner in the sense of collaboratively telling you all the details. They don't figure you need to know, so you don't know. So you feel like you're always like catching up and always outside the loop of things. So you feel like there's just a state of confusion. And then this is a really big one. Do you know what a difference between an argument and a disagreement? Or maybe what's the other word for an argument? Argument, yeah, maybe disagreement. Arguments are, and I heard this from Dr. Gregory Lester, so I want to get credit where credit should go to. Dr. Gregory Lester said, arguments, the point of an argument is to transfer my feeling of upsetness to you so that I leave satisfied because now you're upset. That's the only thing that the person's looking for in an argument, just to offload their upsetness to you, their feelings to you. A problem resolution or problem solving is about finding a solution to a problem. You're looking for an answer and you're working together towards it. Maybe you don't agree on how you do it, but you work together to get to a place of agreement of some kind. No, someone just said disagreements always turned into argument. That to me is a sign that you're with somebody who is dysfunctional, because if you're both working towards the goal of resolution, then there's going to be resolution. You'll even agree to disagree. But when it's an argument, they're offloading their upsetness. They want you upset. That's the point. They don't want resolution. They just want you upset. And once you're upset, they walk away feeling better. So when you're living with someone who needs that, who needs this sense of offloading their emotions as a way to solve their emotions, that's a problem. You're probably living with someone who has a personality disorder. Personality disorders, if you really want to cut through it and get past the criterion, yes, you can Google it. There are 9 criteria. You need 5 of them to qualify. But when you dig below all of it, it is a person who lacks the resources to deal with each situation with adaptability and flexibility. So imagine that you're at a job. Say that you're a supervisor at the job, and you have one of your coworkers who can't seem to think out of the box, and whenever a new situation that doesn't quite go to script come up, they just fall apart. How likely are you going to keep that person as an employee? I wouldn't. That creates more work for me. That's not the point of why I hired them. I wanted someone to hired so that my life is easier, not more complicated. But that's what we get when we get into a relationship with somebody who has a pretty significant personality disorder. We've gotten into a relationship with somebody who applies every situation the same. They lack adaptability and they are not flexible. It has to be their way, every time, exactly in the way that they want it, even when it doesn't apply, it doesn't work, and it needs a completely different kind of perspective. That's why it felt like to me, when I was living with this person, I was constantly beating my head against the wall. Bam, bam. Like, no, we need to show up with understanding of the situation. No, we need to give this person control over it and see what happens. No, this one is you need to approach with trust and we're going to see what happens. We're going to let it play out. You need to be adaptable and flexible. So those are things to watch for. Another thing to watch for is how a person makes you feel. You feeling yourself being insecure and edgy and something just doesn't feel quite right. You're feeling angry. You find they irritate you, drive you nuts. You don't respect them. All these are signs that you've met somebody that has issues. that probably is not the healthiest person to be in a relationship with. But the other way to do it, of course, is to go to, like I said, and Google the DSM-5 and then look for the 9 criteria and see if they get at least 5 of them. I know that you're like, well, but you need to be a clinician. Yeah, technically a clinician needs to diagnose them. The person needs to be over 18, and it needs to be a chronic style of way of relating. Now, how do you know it's not you? Because they'll say it's you. Here's another big thing. Personality disorders is not a condition. They don't know that they have a problem. And to their opinion, they don't have a problem. They think they're great. They think they're fine. They don't realize that there's this path of chaos behind them. They'll say the problem is you because you don't like the way they're doing things. And so if you would just get on board and shut your mouth, things would get better, right? Well, so ask yourself this. If you're wondering, maybe I'm the narcissist, maybe because they say that I am constantly, maybe I am. Ask yourself this. Before I met this person, did my other relationships were the same? Do I have a history of always, now I know a lot of us get into these repeat relationships because once we get familiar with them, we start to then see it and we find the excitement of them. We mistaken that for excitement as attraction and love. And so we kind of get all confused about that. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your girlfriends, the guys you hang out with. You're talking about work, talking about with family. So think back on all these relationships. Are you the common denominator in all of the relationships of all the problems? If so, then maybe you do need to look at yourself and then go ask a psychologist or psychiatrist or another mental health clinician for help on figuring out what is happening, why all of this is going on. But chances are, the fact that you're asking the question suggests that you have self-reflection. Narcissists and antisocial personality disorders don't tend to have much self-reflection. They don't tend to ask themselves this question. In fact, when I met my ex, and this is the part that I always feel embarrassed about, it's like, Kerry, why did you not think about this? I was wife number 5, guys. Wife number 5. I'm ashamed of that. I should have seen that as a problem. He waited until he met me to tell me this. But this guy had a history of his relationships blew apart within 6 months to 2 years. So I knew I was kind of on a timeline. We made it 2 years. But he had a pet right there. You could see it laid out in front of me. He blew everything up within 6 months to 2 years. Little did I know that there were tens of hundreds of women in between all of that, which weren't even relationships at all. They were just really people he was using. But he came in saying he had changed. He had an epiphany. I want to believe people change. So you see, I'm trying to explain myself because I do. I feel very ashamed of that. There's nothing wrong with people having multiple relationships if we do the work and become different people. I wanted to give him a chance to show that. What I missed is that when he gave me the explanation for the failed relationships, he didn't demonstrate insight. This is what he did. Insight would have said, this is how I really fucked things up. With this woman, I just wanted out of the house. And then the minute things got tough, I fled. And I was really an asshole, and I didn't want to ante up and be the man that I should be for my family. I got out of there and left her, and that was really wrong of me. And then I got into another relationship, and it just was tough. Her and I were just, that would sound like that. But this is what he said. Well, the first relationship, I just went out of the home. I didn't really love her. Second relationship, well, she got really heavy, and it was just really dramatic. And the third relationship she was a lot older than me, and she put her friends in front of me. And the fourth relationship, she just didn't tell me the truth. Who could stay in a relationship with somebody who didn't tell me the truth? Now, how much insight do you hear in any of that? I don't hear any insight. See, there's the big red flag that I missed. It wasn't his history. It was an inability to reflect on his history and make sense of it that shows growth. He didn't show any growth. He just showed a lot of blame shifting. That's what we need to watch out for. We need to watch out for that. That not only the trail of problems, and by the way, if you looked at his work history, chaos there too. Left a job every year to 18 months. Usually got in trouble. Usually did something he shouldn't, inappropriate with a woman at work, usually. Or got in trouble with supervision and got fired. Got laid off or fired. But so if you see this just path of destruction behind these people, that's to you a tip off that you've met somebody who's having serious problems. Now, can they change? I know that's where it always goes next. We want to know, well, here's the hard part. It's part of their hard wiring. It's part of their personality. It's not a condition. It's not depression or anxiety that happens to us and then we get medication and it changes. It's the way that they see the world. It's the tools that life, God, environment, whatever you want to say, handed them. And as a result, they're missing critical tools. It's like you trying to build a house without a level and, a measuring tape. It's going to be very hard to build that house and have it be anything that you can use. It's going to be extremely difficult. Now, you can learn workarounds these missing things, but you have to then do another hard thing that people who are narcissistic or antisocial personality disorders don't do, and that is believe when someone else tells you there's a better way to do it and submit to their suggestions. How many people do you know who are narcissistic or have a lot of these traits can do that? I don't know many. They don't listen. They don't think anybody knows anything other than what they know. They think they know everything or know the better or have a better way. And they certainly then don't submit to the wisdom of someone else for any long. In fact, they have what's called low receptive capacity. What that is imagine you got a cup that holds water. But at the bottom of this cup, it has holes. So whatever you pour into it, like knowledge, information, education, love, adoration, all of these things, instead of it being contained and helping and improve because it fills it up with information or love or whatever, it drains out, drains out, drains out. So you have people that you tell them things and then you walk away and they literally, they don't remember. It's like as if you never said that. That's why your supply, we're in supply, but it's a never-ending supply because you can never give enough because they need more and need more because it's draining right through the bottom of the cup. It's called low receptive capacity. So how do you change when you're missing these critical key factors that you should have had in your personality disorder, in your personality, should have been built in? You don't retain things well. And then on top of it, you don't submit and trust other people. And you really don't like the loss of control. That's why a lot of them don't change. And the ones that you do, the ones who become self-aware, that's why we call them self-aware. They've become aware of the problems and they're submitting to the wisdom of somebody else. But they're unicorns. I'm going to tell you, yes, unicorns sometimes exist, but there's not many of them. There really is not many of them. So this today, what I just did is being taped and it's going to go live on YouTube on Tuesday at 2 p.m. And today, in a few minutes, in 4 minutes, what I talked about on Thursday is going to go live on YouTube. Right now, it's it's Kerry McAvoy, PhD. And I would love to know, what is it you wish I would talk about? What topics, what long subjects would you like me to put videos up of? I would love to hear your opinions on that. Please make sure you like and follow me on all these platforms. It really helps me a lot, and it just helps me to get to know you better, honestly. I feel like I'm developing relationships with all of you, and you mean so much to me, so thank you for that. I really appreciate this. And I will be back on Thursday at 1 p.m. to talk more, take your questions, and do this again with you. And please, yes, do I want to sell the webinar? Absolutely, I want to sell the webinar, but I want to help you. I want to help you. When I read that book, I reached out to her, not knowing if she would ever, in a million years, reach back. I was stunned that she did. I was stunned that Dr. Milstead agreed to be interviewed. This is for you. This is for the me back there that needed that. So please come to the live webinar on Why Can't I Just Leave on August 18th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You guys are freaking amazing. I love you so much. Please, if you have a problem, DM me over on Instagram. I can point you in some directions. I don't do counseling these days, but I can point you in some directions. I have a podcast, by the way. It's Breaking Free of Narcissistic Abuse. It is posted every week on Mondays and Thursdays at 8 a.m. So I will see you guys on Thursday at 1. Bye-bye.